American Vampire Volume 6, The Long Road to Hell. The primary writer and artist are Scott Snyder and Rafael Albuquerque, but we also have a slew of other writers and artists in this volume. Alright, so the last volume of American Vampire, Volume 5, that saw the end of the first cycle of American Vampire with some very big character moments happening. Then, Scott Snyder, he took about a year break before finally coming back with the second cycle of American Vampire. But in between that year break, there was 2 one-shot specials published. One was called The Long Road to Hell, where we meet some new characters and we have a return of a fan favorite, and it's a pretty good story. And then afterwards, there was an American Vampire anthology issue, and what anthology issues are is you get a whole bunch of different creators, so writers and artists, and they do their take on a short story set within the world of American Vampire. Some of the stories are pretty good, some are middling, and some are kind of bad, but I always find it kind of fun seeing what different creators' take is on American Vampire, seeing what they do with it, and sort of ranking, like, alright, who did a good job and who did a bad job. So it's kind of fun seeing how that all goes down. So while this volume is not maybe essential, and while there are parts of it that are there is still a lot of fun to have and some good stuff in here. So let's dive into it. American Vampire Volume 6. The Long Road to Hell. This story starts in Nebraska in 1959. We see a young couple dancing. The male is named Billy Bob Lee, and the female is named Jolene Gibbons. Billy says to Jolene, "It's showtime, honey." And through their dancing, Billy tosses Jolene towards some other dancers, bumping into them, and she manages to pickpocket the male, stealing his wallet. Jolene apologizes to the man, but then her and Billy quickly leave and count their loot in the parking lot. The two of them are in love, and they have plans on one day getting married. Jolene says before they leave, she has to use the ladies' room for a sec, and she leaves Billy alone. Now, while Billy is alone, a woman in a green, somewhat revealing top claims that she is having some car trouble, and she asks if Billy can take a look and help her out. Being a nice guy, Billy agrees. The woman leads Billy to some nearby trees. Turns out the woman in green is a Carpathian vampire, and she attacks Billy Bob. And she is aided by some other Carpathian vampires that join in on her attack on Billy. Jolene comes back from the ladies' room and she's looking for Billy, can't find him. Eventually she hones in on him and goes over to him, and then she too is now accosted by all these other vampires. Billy Bob and Jolene were knocked out, and after some time passes, the two of them wake up, disoriented. They are surrounded by vampires. The main vampire here is smoking a cigar. His name is Oscar Brood. Oscar is a criminal and he has some business rivals, and he knew that Billy Bob and Jolene were good thieves, so he's going to now recruit them into his army. He tells Billy Bob and Jolene that they are now his minions. Billy Bob and Jolene don't want any part of this, but Oscar's vampires have bit into them, and Billy Bob and Jolene will soon be turned into vampires themselves. The transformation just needs a little more time. Oscar tells them the bite on their neck should convince them that they are now his property, and he tells them to kiss the ring as proof of their obedience to him. All of a sudden, though, some other vampires jump through the window. They are other minions of this Oscar Brood that he turned, and they are not happy about it. They complain to Brood, "We want our lives back, Brood. We want the cure. The California facility is gone. Tell us about the Vegas initiative. Tell us the truth about Vegas. Do you have the cure?" Billy Bob and Jolene have no idea what these other people are talking about, but they take advantage of all the confusion and start trying to escape. Before they leave, though, in all this commotion, they manage to steal Oscar Brood's ring he had right off his finger. We will learn later that this ring is actually somewhat important. Billy Bob and Jolene, they get out of there. They manage to escape and steal a car and drive away. They drove all night to get away from these vampires, but they drove too fast and they flipped their car off the side of the road. They were both afraid they were going to die, but then their vampire bites finally affected them and started turning them, and they are now Carpathian vampires. Billy Bob, he has more strength now and he manages to crawl out of the car and bring Jolene with him. They were both now newly turned vampires, and they were so thirsty for blood. They walked to a nearby town and found a gentleman's club. Jolene decided to kill the guy outside who was trying to entice them to come into the club. Billy Bob tried to stop her, but Jolene rationalized no one would miss this guy. They brought this guy out to the desert and they both feasted on this stranger. Afterwards, Billy Bob and Jolene deeply regretted what they did. They regretted that they are now these monsters and are feasting on people. They remembered that those other vampires that attacked Oscar Brood earlier mentioned a potential cure in Las Vegas. Something about an initiative? They both decide that they need to continue on to Las Vegas and see if they can find a cure or something. Besides, they always wanted to get married, and Las Vegas is a good place to do that. Now we jump back to that Oscar Brood. He is talking to his vampire minions. Oscar Brood says they need to find this Billy Bob and Jolene. They stole his ring, and his ring is something called a dynasty ring, and without it, he will lose power over the whole vampire coven he commands. We now jump over to an orphanage, and we meet a new little kid, and his name is Jasper Miller. And this Jasper Miller is getting beat on by a couple of other kids. They are kicking and stomping him. Eventually, little Jasper gets helped up by another student, a girl, and she gives him her tuna sandwich. Eventually, though, little Jasper Miller gets in trouble. The boys that beat him up go to the adult in charge and accuse Jasper of throwing rocks at them. And Jasper, he gets in trouble, and he is dragged away by the janitor named Mr. Harris. Mr. Harris was ordered to take Jasper Miller to a place called The Room as punishment. So Jasper, he is locked in this room. He starts talking to the janitor, who seems to be guarding the room he is locked in. Jasper says to the janitor, Mr. Harris, that he's sorry for his loss. She was a nice girl. A shame what they did to her. Apparently, this Mr. Harris lost a daughter here at school. She died. Mr. Harris grows sad and angry, and he asks Jasper Miller, "What are you talking about? What do you know about her, kid? Tell me, and I'll let you go." Jasper says that one of the other boys, the one named Brian, pushed her onto the street. Mr. Harris, shocked by this, lets Jasper out of the room, fulfilling his side of the bargain, and he then walks off. Jasper tells Mr. Harris, "Please, Mr. Harris, promise me you'll stay calm." And Mr. Harris says, I promise. We learn later on, Mr. Harris went on to kill the various orphans there, and then he killed himself. The next time we see Jasper Miller is a few days later, and his story intersects now with Billy Bob and Jolene. They are all at a gas station. Jasper must have made his way there after leaving the orphanage, and Billy Bob and Jolene are just traveling on their way to their next destination in Las Vegas. The radio is actually reporting on some of Billy Bob and Jolene's murders they've done recently, and the news is referring to them as the Heartbreak Killers. Now, Jasper Miller, he's watching the people at this gas station, and he sees a big man in a suit yelling at his wife. And Jasper comments that guy's a wife beater, he knows it. Billy Bob, who's just walking by, overhears Jasper and says, "How do you know that, kid?" And Jasper explains that he just has a feeling. He's known a lot of bad people in his life, I guess. Billy Bob asks if Jasper is sure, and Jasper says he'd bet $1 on it. Billy Bob offers Jasper some food. He then introduces Jasper to his girlfriend, Jolene. Billy Bob says, "Jolene, Jasper here is a very talented kid. He knows how to identify, let's say, bad people. Ain't that right, Jasper?" And Jasper answers, "I just kinda know people by the way they move and how they talk. There are a lot of things that can tell you the truth about people." Jolene tests Jasper. "Alright, Sherlock, so what's the deal with me?" And Jasper answers, "You have a good heart, no matter what you've done before. Your eyes tell me that." Billy Bob's impressed. He tells Jasper, "You know what? I tell her that all the time. So where are you going again, boy?" Jasper sees all the Las Vegas pamphlets in the back of Billy Bob's car. So Jasper answers, "Las Vegas." Billy Bob says, "Destiny then." So he offers to give Jasper a ride. Before they leave the gas station, Billy Bob says he's gotta go inside and pay for the gas. And when he goes inside that gas station, that supposed wife beater is there that Jasper pointed out earlier, and we can only assume that Billy Bob feasted on him. Billy Bob, Jolene, and Jasper start driving. Jasper says he's gonna go to Vegas to finally meet his dad, whom he's never met. Billy Bob then explains to Jasper, "So, Jasper, the thing is, Jolene and I, we have a condition. We've been sick and we heard that there might be a cure down there. Until then, well, that's why we need you. We need you to find us some bad people to, well, renew our energy until we're cured. Also, it seems like the perfect place to get married, right, Jolene?" So that is why Billy Bob wants this Jasper Miller to tag along, because Jasper seems to have this innate ability to pick out bad people. And if Billy Bob and Jolene have to be eating people and feasting on their blood, they want to make sure they're bad people at least. They drive some more, play some tunes, and eventually turn in for the night at a quiet motel. At the motel, Jolene and Jasper are talking while Billy Bob sleeps. Jasper explains his ability to pick out bad people. He almost has an intuitive ability to know everything about someone, no matter what they say. It kind of made him a little bit of a target with the other kids at the orphanage, though, and they would beat him up. Jasper, he has a picture of his supposed father that he's going to Las Vegas to see. Jasper says his dad is an airline pilot. Now Jolene, this causes her to start talking about her dad, and she says that he would beat on her mom and would abuse her, and it caused Jolene to run away from home and do all sorts of things she's not too proud of. Billy Bob eventually wakes up in a sweat. He needs to feed. Billy Bob asks Jasper to find someone for him, quick. Jasper says he noticed the guys next door, they were really weird. Billy Bob says, that's good enough for him. So he's gonna go feast on the people next door. Billy Bob and Jolene start sneaking next door in this motel, and they see this Oscar brood and some Carpathian vampire companions with him. Oscar brood tells them, hello, I believe you have something that belongs to me. Go get it, boys! So Oscar brood has followed Billy Bob and Jolene here, and he wants to get that ring of his back. Oscar brood's vampires are about to attack, but just as they are about to start, they get shot multiple times and sliced through with a sword. But who did it though? Oscar brood says, you! And he's scared. And then he gets decapitated by Travis Kidd, the previous teenaged vampire hunter killer we saw in Volume 4 in the Death Race story arc. Travis Kidd, not knowing that Billy Bob and Jolene were also vampires, he tells them to get in their car and drive as fast as they can and forget about what they saw here. Billy Bob and Jolene are happy to do so. Travis, he then returns to his car. He turns on the radio, and the news on the radio is reporting that the Heartbreak Killers might be traveling with a third person now, a young boy who went missing from an orphanage. Travis, then realizing that he just let these dangerous people go, says to himself, "Shit." Billy Bob, Jolene, and Jasper are driving as fast as they can away. Billy Bob and Jolene, though, they can't stand it. The hunger, the thirst, they can't take it anymore. They are passing by the Welcome to Las Vegas sign, and eventually Billy Bob stops the car. He tells little Jasper Miller that he's got to get out of the car. They don't want to eat him, but they can't control themselves. Jasper, he doesn't want to be abandoned again, though. But Jolene, she throws Jasper out of the car to save him from herself. Billy Bob, he can't fight his hunger anymore, though, and he starts walking towards Jasper. Jolene, she's trying to hold on to Billy Bob, but he tosses her aside. And before Billy Bob can grab Jasper and eat him, Travis Kidd catches back up to them and attempts to slice up Billy Bob with his sword. Travis slices in Billy Bob's back. Billy Bob then lunges at Travis and says, "We need the cure." Travis to this replies, "Bad news, buddy." Travis explains that rumors of a cure started years ago. Folks said it was back in Europe, and then in California, that was the hot spot, and the next spot was Vegas. But Travis says he just made up that. He's the one that started the rumor that a cure was in Vegas, but there was never a cure. Travis told a rival group of vampires that this Oscar brood knew where a cure was, and those vampires led Travis right to Oscar brood. Travis apologizes though. He says he didn't mean to get them two mixed up in it. Jolene jumps and tackles Travis. She is going to bite into him and kill him, but Billy Bob stops her. He tells her, "Stop. He isn't bad. Travis isn't bad, and we ain't bad either." As excruciatingly hungry as they are, Billy Bob, he knows that they can't kill Travis, who is deep down a good guy. Billy Bob and Jolene realize that they can't go on living like this, trying to fight this hunger, killing people to stay alive. They ask Travis to kill them, and Travis tells them, "You're doing the right thing here." Jasper, he yells out for Travis to stop. Billy Bob and Jolene, they always said they wanted to get married in Las Vegas. Well, they can still do that before Travis kills them. And Billy Bob, he agrees. He wants to marry his girlfriend Jolene before they pass on. Travis, he obliges their wish. With Jasper, Travis drives Billy Bob and Jolene to a Las Vegas wedding chapel for them to get married at. Travis, at gunpoint, tells the priest he's got one more ceremony to perform tonight. Billy Bob and Jolene walk in with their red vampire eyes, and they look clearly like undead monsters. The priest, at first, refuses when he sees them, but Travis, with the gun pointed at the priest, tells him, "We don't have much time, Padre." Travis and Jasper wait outside the wedding chapel. While inside the wedding chapel, the priest performs the ceremony, and Billy Bob and Jolene are pronounced man and wife, and Billy Bob kisses Jolene. And once the ceremony ends, Travis heads back inside and shoots and kills them both. Travis, he's gonna leave now and head off in his car. Before he does, though, he asks Jasper, what's he gonna do now? And Jasper answers, "I'm gonna find my dad." And Jasper shows Travis that picture of his dad that he showed Jolene earlier. And Travis, looking at the picture, he knows that that's not Jasper's real dad. The guy in the picture is famous. His name is Danny Danger. He was a stunt pilot, and he died 18 years ago. Travis calls the kid out on his bullshit, and he asks the kid, "What else have you been lying about?" Travis leaves the kid behind out front of the wedding chapel. Jasper waits outside the wedding chapel, and eventually a cop shows up. He's there to investigate the report of shots fired here. The cop asks Jasper, "What's a young boy like you doing around here this late at night? Are you lost?" And Jasper says, "I came looking for my father." And the cop asks, "Well, where can we find your daddy, buddy?" And little Jasper, looking at the poster for the fabulous illusionist Tyanak performing at the Municipal Theater. Well, little Jasper, I assume lying, tells the cop, "Can you take me to the Municipal Theater?" And that is the end of the Long Road to Hell one-shot issue. What else was this little Jasper Miller lying about? American Vampire Anthology #1. This next issue is an anthology issue, so it's just a collection of random short stories set in different time periods and places with different writers and artists. The creative team on some of these short stories is pretty impressive though. Jason Aaron, Jeff Lemire, Greg Rucka, etc. Anyway, let's dive into them. The first story is Lost Colony, written by Jason Aaron and art by Declan Shalvey. The year is 1588. The Choanoke Indians have come across a new settlement from Europeans that have arrived 3 years earlier. 2 Choanoke Indians go to see this village and they sneak in. It seems abandoned. No crops, no livestock, and they never see the people here hunt. It's a mystery to the Choanokes how these people survived here, until eventually these 2 Choanokes finally come across a barn, and they see all the dead human bodies there hung up like cattle in a slaughterhouse. The truth is that Carpathian vampires lived here in that village, an entire town of them. The 2 Choanoke Indians ran back to their tribe and spoke to their elders about what they saw. The elders decided that they would have to investigate themselves, but before they could head back there and check it out, the Carpathian vampire settlers had already found them and began attacking them. The Choanokes fought back, but they never faced an enemy like this before. The Choanokes attacked the Carpathian vampires with their stone axes and arrowheads, but they were useless against the vampires, and a lot of the Choanokes got slaughtered. In the morning, the Choanokes that did survive fled into the forest. The chief was among them. The chief was counseled that they should all run as far and as fast as they can. The settlers will return when it's dark to finish them off. But the chief, he refused. He said that this is their homeland and has been for generations. He will not abandon it now. He is going to go into the forest and talk with the spirits. If the spirits want them to stay, then the spirits will give them an answer. So the chief, he went into the forest and he did not return before nightfall. And the settler vampires returned and continued fighting the Choanokes, killing more of them. But finally, the chief returned. He had a staff formed into a long wooden stake, and he used it to kill a few of these Carpathian vampires who, we all know, are weak to wood. The chief then explains to his fellow Choanokes that he prayed for hours under the trees, and the spirits finally gave him an answer. The very land itself is what would save them. So the chief tells his fellow Choanokes to pick up a piece of forest and come with him. The Choanokes, using the wood and the trees, managed to fight back and over time kill all the Carpathian vampires in the area. And they killed the whole vampire settlement, every man, woman, and child. And with that, the Choanokes survived, for a while more at least, on the land that had been theirs for centuries. The chief exclaimed, "Please, let there be no more of these." But even as he spoke those words, the chief knew in his heart it was a hopeless plea. The settlers will keep coming, this he knew, until the tribes are all but gone and the land scarred forever and the sky blotted out with fire. They will keep coming until they've killed us all. we see the name of the settlement was New Carpathia. The next short story is Bleeding Kansas, written by Rafael Albuquerque and art by Ivo Milazzo. The story takes place in Kansas in 1856, 1 year after the American Civil War ended. In this story, we have a married couple. The man is Gil Jones, and the female is Mary Jones. I believe they are Pearl Jones's grandparents, or at least connected to her family tree in some way, as Pearl was born in Kansas and initially from here. But Pearl wouldn't be born for another 40 or 50 years or so. So Gil and Marie Jones have came to Kansas in search of a new life. Marie thinks that it's a little bit of a backwater town they're moving into and is not really a good place to start a family. But Gil is optimistic and thinks that this place will bring in new opportunities and it will represent revolution. Now, Gil is anti-slavery, and he's arguing with some of the white citizens here about how their society should be based on equality and that slaves should become citizens. And the rebuttal given to him is, "Calm down, sir. We appreciate your progressive ideas, but comparing slaves to people is nonsense. This is Kansas just after the Civil War. He is not going to get a welcome reception to these thoughts." Gil grows angry and complains to his wife later. His wife shares that she is pregnant. Gil, he's starting to have second thoughts. Maybe this place isn't the right place to raise a family, but Marie says that it is, and they have to fight to make it right for their family. They need to stay and find a place to build their home and make a stand for their home. Later on, their town in Kansas is attacked by border ruffians, and the border ruffians are burning down the town. And we see some of these so-called border ruffians are actually Carpathian vampires. Gil and Marie try to shoot and fight them off. Marie, she runs inside to go grab a pistol, and when she returns, her husband Gil is getting bit in the neck and is killed. Marie, she runs off into the forest, trying to get away. She's scared. She sits by a nearby tree. She only has one bullet left in her gun. She decides that she's gonna kill herself. But as the Carpathian vampires approach her, the sun rises and comes up, and it burns all the vampires dead. And Marie then decides that this is where I'll make a stand for our home. The next story is Canadian Vampire, written by Jeff Lemire, art by Ray Fox. If you like Jeff Lemire, be sure to check out my other series of videos on the comic series Sweet Tooth by him. Now the year is 1877. We see ex-Mountie and ex-bounty hunter named Jack Warnhammer. Jack, he is good at killing, and he is offering his talents for pay. Apparently, some Germans are looking to get into the fur trade, and they want some help setting up a new fort off a small island near Moose River. Some settlers went up there already, but they haven't been heard of in 3 weeks. So, Jack got hired by a man there to clear all the Indians off that island so that the Germans can set up shop. Jack Warnhammer, he goes up there, he starts on his mission, he's walking through the snow. He eventually comes across a little native Cree boy. The native is scared. There is blood all over his campsite. And Jack asks the kid in an accusing kind of way, "What happened here?" And the little Cree boy says that the white man came and they were bad and they had dead eyes and dead hearts. And one by one they took my people into their camp promising to trade furs, but my people never came back. And they burned our canoes and trapped us here. The little boy tells Jack that they need to leave this place. It's almost dark. Eventually, some Carpathian vampires arrive. Some of them look German, and some of them look like the previous Cree people that have now been turned into vampires. The vampires are all staring Jack and the little boy down. The main German vampire here gloats, "I have ambitious plans for this wonderful new land, so white, so cold, and its natives taste so goddamn good, especially the young ones. Jack, he decides he's gonna protect this kid. Jack and the boy begin to try and run away. They're running through the snow. Eventually, Jack tells the boy, "Listen, kid, I can hold them. You get to the canoe." The little boy tells Jack, "But you cannot fight them. You'll become like them." The vampire that is now caught up to Jack says, "Come now, let's say you hand over the little savage. We'll let you have him when we're done." But Jack, he says, "No, I will never be like them." Jack, he tells the boy to run on without him. And then Jack turns to face the vampires with his axe, and he starts slicing through them, saying, "All right then, you kraut fucks. You think you can come to my country and spread your disease? Not as long as there's still true Canadian blood left in Jack Warnhammer's veins." Jack, he yells for the kid to go. The little Cree boy makes it to Jack's canoe, and he starts heading off the island. The little boy, he made it to shore 3 days later, terrified but still alive. He never spoke of what happened on that island, and he never saw or heard from the man who saved him, Jack, once again. The Cree boy didn't even know his name, but the man called him Kid. Kid! That was the first English word the Cree boy ever learned, and he carried that word with him, and eventually passed that name onto his family. And with that clue, we assume that that little Cree boy is an ancestor of Travis Kidd. The next story is Greed, written and art by Becky Cloonan, and this short story takes place in 1924, a year before Skinner would go to Hollywood and meet Pearl. So, Skinner is in Death Valley, the desert. He is just lying around, and he sees some people shooting a movie. Skinner thinks, "Oh, this'll be promising." Now, apparently one of the actors on set is sick. He's dehydrated from being in the desert so long. And one of the women on set spots Skinner and asks him if he wants to take part in the movie. Skinner, he's in. Skinner, he doesn't have to say anything, and the camera won't do any close-ups on him because he's just going to be standing in for a fighting scene. So, Skinner, he acts in the scene. Him and this other actor are supposedly fighting, trying to wrestle for a gun, and Skinner wins the fight in the end. And after the scene finishes shooting, Skinner is thanked by the woman that recruited him into the movie, and she tells him, if you're ever in Hollywood, to give her a ring. And that was about the end of that story, and we assume that Skinner Sweet went on to Hollywood after that, perhaps partly inspired by this interaction. The next story arc is The Producers, written and art by Francesco Francavilla. For those of you familiar with my channel, I covered a series called Afterlife with Archie with artwork by him, so consider checking that out. Now this story takes place in 1925 in Hollywood. We see actor Chase Hamilton is acting in a movie that is playing in a cinema. You should remember Chase Hamilton from Volume 1 of American Vampire. He was the famous actor that was working with the Carpathian vampire B.D. Bloke and was supplying him human victims in exchange for fame and fortune and success in Hollywood. So Chase Hamilton at this point is starring in a movie and is a big success. The movie ends and everyone in the cinema applauds. They love it and they love him. Afterwards, Chase Hamilton is talking to a woman who idolizes him. He asks her if she's interested in becoming the next Hollywood star. She of course says yes. How did Chase Hamilton get to this point in his career where he was a big success? Well, 2 years earlier in 1923, somewhere in the outskirts of LA, Chase Hamilton was a bum, a failed actor whose career was going nowhere. He was living with other bums under a bridge. One night, those bums were visited by Carpathian vampire and movie producer B.D. Bloke, who was watching them from a distance. Chase and the other bums wondered what this guy's deal was. Chase decided to go talk to the man. The other bums cautioned against it, but Chase, he continues onward. He chases after this beady bloke and follows him, but beady bloke walked onward and appeared to enter a nearby old building. Chase, he goes into the building, and inside, beady bloke jumps Chase Hamilton and is going to enjoy his next meal eating him. But before he can, though, a vassals of the Morningstar vampire hunter named Jeremiah Heron is pointing a crossbow at beady bloke and tells the vampire to keep your fangs off him. Let him go. Beady bloke lets Chase go. Chase Hamilton talks to the VMS agent, and the agent tells Chase that vampires are indeed real and that he works for an organization that kills them. He says, "We knew of vampire activities in the area, so I've been scouting the place in the guise of a bum, waiting for this devilish creature to show up, and he finally did. Now stay back while I send this abomination back to hell." But then something unexpected happens. Chase Hamilton whacks the VMS agent over the head and saves beady bloke. Beady bloke, shocked, surprised, asks, Why did you do it?" And Chase Hamilton answers, "Because if you really are what he said you are, maybe we can help each other out." And beady bloke replies, "I'm listening." And Chase Hamilton continues, "If your kind can help me get into the movie business, I can provide you with fresh blood. I know how to pick people who have no connection here, so nobody will be missing them or looking for them. Deal?" And beady bloke answers, "Deal." Back to 1925 in Hollywood, Chase Hamilton brings the newest wannabe starlet he met at the beginning of the story over to beady bloke's mansion under the guise of her meeting the producers. And then we assume she is devoured in very much the same way that Pearl was in Volume 1. Next story, Essence of Life, written by Gail Simone and art by Tula Lotoy. This story is particularly brutal to read, depicting sexual assault. So just a heads up on that if you are sensitive to those kinds of stories. It is 1925. In Hollywood, we see a young Hattie Hargrove working in a flower store on the side as she tries to make it as an actress. One day, Hollywood big shot director Dominic Kurzikel comes into the flower shop and flirts with Hattie, kisses her hand. When he finds out that she's a wannabe actress, he compliments her. In a way, he hints that maybe he'll be able to give her some work in one of his movies. He invites her to his birthday party. He has his assistant Vincent handle the details. Hattie, she shows up to that birthday party, and Vincent, the assistant, ushers Hattie into the room with Dominic. It soon becomes apparent that this will be a very transactional relationship. Dominic is in a bathrobe and Hattie is told to get on her knees, and they wouldn't be having sex, but Hattie would have to perform oral on him. Hattie felt disgusted afterwards, felt that she lost her will to live. She vividly describes the feeling of her knees aching and rubbing raw on the polished wooden floor. Afterwards, the assistant, Vincent, walks Hattie to a car to send her home. Hattie asks if she should call Dominic about the movie role, and Vincent tells her, "Never call Mr. Kurzikel again, you hear me?" He tells her to be on the movie set at 9:15 sharp, and to not mess up her lines. So they are giving her a small bit part in the movie at least, and Vincent, being a gigantic asshole, says to the limo driver, "You take this South Side snatch out of here before she gives half the studio the clap." Not enough to arrange for a sexual assault, he also has to insult her within earshot as well. Hattie, she showed up on the movie set and she was ignored by this Dominic and told to be quiet. Then eventually Hattie finally had her big scene in the movie with a big-time Hollywood actress. But Hattie, still emotional about everything, ended up crying in the scene, and she was yelled off the set and they accused her of overacting and trying to steal the scene. Dominic, the director, says, "Get off my set, you useless slut." Wow, they are really mean to Hattie here. Later on, Hattie becomes an American vampire, and she came back for her revenge, and she killed both the director Dominic and his assistant, Vincent. Alright, the next story is Last Night, written and art by Gabriel Ba and Fabio Moon. This story is set in New York City in 1940. We see a young female black singer named Cora giving an interview to a reporter, recounting what happened the night before at the club she was performing at. So we see the night before, everyone in the club was having a good time, and Cora went up on stage to sing and she killed it. Everyone loved her. Afterwards, she went backstage, where she was told a particular group of individuals wanted to show their appreciation. Turns out that group of individuals was vampires. The vampires charged and tried to eat her and the members of her band. Cora, she ran, scared. She headed for the fire escape exit. The fire escape exit stairs ended up crashing down to the ground, and Cora fell to the street. The vampires assumed she died, and they went back inside, and they killed every last human in the building. When Cora woke up the next day, after lying on the ground that night, she went back inside the club and saw that everyone was dead. Now we jump back to that reporter interviewing Cora and asking her her story, but the reporter, after listening to her, tells her, "This is all very unfortunate, but I'm afraid I can't print your story." And Cora asks, "Why? I'm telling the truth, mister, you gotta believe me." And the reporter continues, "Oh, I believe you, and I'm sure if I print it, the readers of the Clarion will too. And then they'll start asking questions, and I just can't have that happen." The reporter then reveals his red eyes, showing that he is indeed a Carpathian vampire himself. This is a callback to Volume 3, The Survival of the Fittest miniseries, where we learned that the Carpathian vampires were embedded in the Clarion newspaper and killing stories that could expose them. And here we have an example of that in action. The next story is Portland, 1940, written by Greg Rucka and art by J.P. Leone. This story takes place in Portland in 1940. We see Skinner Sweet, who seems fairly sick. He's disoriented, he bumps into some strangers and they beat him up. A man eventually helps Skinner, assuming that Skinner is a drunk, and walks Skinner to a nearby bar. The man that brought Skinner is talking to the bartender, and we learn that the bartender and this man are working in cahoots. These men are what are called crimps. They are partaking in the real activity at the time of what was called Shanghaiing someone. I was not familiar with this practice before reading this story, but what Shanghaiing someone is, it was the practice of kidnapping people to serve as sailors by coercive techniques such as trickery, intimidation, or violence, and they would sell those people to the captains of ships. It was a real thing. So you'd find a drunk or drugged up guy and sell him to the ship captain, sign him up as a sailor, and that man would be forced to serve as a sailor on that ship. And there was a law that when an American sailor signed on board a vessel for voyage, it was illegal for him to leave the ship before the voyage's end, under penalty of imprisonment. So anyway, Skinner is passed out at the bar, and these two are planning on selling Skinner to a ship captain. However, they check Skinner's pulse and then they assume that he's dead. However, the bartender and the man with Skinner thinks that they can still sell Skinner to a boat captain as a forced sailor, as the ship captains often buy drugged people, and this wouldn't be the first time that they sold a corpse to a captain. By the time the captain would realize that he bought a stiff, he'll be 20 miles at sea. So the men, they drag Skinner's body away, preparing to sell him. As they are investigating Skinner's body, they comment on how Skinner's covered in blood. And if the captain sees that, he won't buy. So they decide to strip Skinner of his clothes and see if they can rustle up some clean clothes for him and clean him up a bit. As they are preparing Skinner's body, the bartender, who's looking through it very thoroughly, finds a gold bullet lodged inside Skinner and he fishes it out. He can't believe his luck. Free gold! Skinner, though, with the gold taken out of him now, feels better. He wakes up. That's what was making him sick. And Skinner comments, "I thought I dug all of you out of me back in Nevada. And here you are hiding inside me all these years." Skinner then kills the bartender and feasts on him. And when the other man returns with some clean clothes, he asks, "How's the dead guy?" Not realizing that Skinner is awake. And Skinner replies, "He's feeling much better, thank you for asking. He doesn't even mind how you tried to kidnap him to sell as crew. He can see a profit in that, matter of fact. He thinks you might need a new partner." Alright, the last story is The Man Comes Around, Part 1 and 2, written by Scott Snyder and art by Rafael Albuquerque. This one is set in 1967, which is as far in the future as we have seen in American Vampire so far. So we are in New Mexico. We see Skinner Sweet enter a diner to pick up some sweets, perhaps pastries or another sugary baked good. The diner owner seems nervous giving Skinner the box of pastries. He tells Skinner, "These were baked less than an hour ago. They're still settling, so keep the lid closed." Skinner refuses. He wants to see these pastries. Turns out, as he opens the lid, there was a bomb inside, set to go off as soon as Skinner opened it. And as Skinner opens that lid, boom! The entire diner goes up in flames. Two guys on a motorcycle were watching the explosion from a distance, and they say, "Done and done." So these two gentlemen were here to kill Skinner Sweet, it seems, and make sure that this bomb did him in. But come on, it's gonna take more than an explosion to kill Skinner Sweet. He walks out of the diner, the entire thing in flames, his clothes burned off. Skinner then hisses. Skinner, he ended up walking over and killing those men on their motorcycle that were there to kill him. And then Skinner walks over to his car and drives off. All the while, a man who I assume is the mysterious Grey Trader we met in Volume 5 watches onward, teasing that we're going to see more of the Grey Trader and Skinner Sweet in future storylines. Alright, so that was Volume 6. I really liked the Long Road to Hell storyline. Seeing Billy Bob and Jolene and their relationship, and then they become vampires and they have to fight their vampire urges. You see them struggle with that, and then they meet this kid who's also kind of twisted, and they go on this little adventure. And then we have Travis Kidd coming back into the story, and he's killing vamps. All in all, a very fun, very satisfying one-shot story, so I'm glad I read it, and I think it was worth going through. Now, in the Anthology issue, that's a little bit more of a mixed bag. Anthology issues are not usually my favorite, but like I said, it is fun kind of like ranking who did it best and seeing other people's take on the American Vampire world. So in order from least favorite to favorite, ranking those, my least favorite story was Greed by Becky Cloonan. That's the one where Skinner Sweet's in the desert and he stars in the movie. I really felt there was no point to that one. Bleeding Kansas by Rafael Albuquerque. I liked seeing Pearl Jones's relatives and getting some of that Kansas backstory, but evidently not much going on there. Essence of Life. I thought it was really brutal seeing Hattie Hargrove and what was done to her, but I didn't feel the story was well put together. Canadian Vampire by Jeff Lemire. The artwork was really bad in this one, but the story was kind of compelling, I must say. Last Night, the one where we have the lounge singer and she's being interviewed by the reporter. I thought it was interesting seeing the reporter going to suppress her story and how that ties into what we saw in the Survival of the Fittest story arc. So I really like the concept for this one. The Man That Comes Around. This one was a very short one. Skinner Sweet in a diner, it explodes, and then he sort of beats some guys up and walks on. Not much going on here, but the artwork was nice, and I like how we're hinting at stuff to come in the future. Portland, 1940. I thought this was an interesting concept by Greg Rucka, where these people are trying to Shanghai Skinner Sweet and sell him to the ship captain, but then Skinner wakes up. I thought it was really compelling, that one. The Producers by Francesco Frank Avila. I really like the artwork and seeing the afterlife with Archie artist doing his take on American Vampire, and I liked seeing this Chase Hamilton and getting some backstory filled in with how he came to be working with the vampire, so I thought that was really cool. And my favorite was Lost Colony by Jason Aaron. I liked the concept of these Indians being attacked by these settlers that are vampires, and the Indians eventually win, but of course it will be short-lived because they will eventually lose as the white man takes their land. So yeah, I thought that was a really compelling story. So those were my thoughts on the anthology issue. Let me know your thoughts in the comments about which short story you liked best. Alright, I would give this volume a 7.5 out of 10. There's some good, there's some bad, it's a little bit filler, but on the whole, there's enough here that makes it kind of a fun read. Thank you all for watching, and I will be back next week with Volume 7, and we will finally begin the second cycle of American Vampire and see where Scott Snyder goes from here.